North Korea is one of the greatest challenges facing humanity today, and it has traditionally been seen and widely recognized as one of the most repressive countries in the world. And it makes every attempt to deny any form of political and economic freedom, even the most basic freedom of free speech, free movement, and freedom of information. And the government attempts to maintain control of its 24 million citizens through a system of extreme fear, propaganda, and oppression. Now, if you remember recently, this is a government that brutally executed one of the most powerful people in the country, Jang Sung-taek, who was Kim Jong-un, the current leader's uncle. If this is how they treat people at the top within leadership, imagine how they treat ordinary North Koreans. Over the past 6 decades, the North Korean government has maintained a ruthlessly efficient system of political control, ultimately to ensure its own survival. It's estimated that 80,000 to 100,000 North Korean people today are imprisoned in political prison camps in North Korea. These prison camps are very reminiscent of the Soviet gulags and the Nazi concentration camps. The conditions are horrific. Rape, torture, execution are commonplace. Honestly, I think it's difficult for us to really understand how terrible the conditions are inside of these camps. But these are some of the cruelest places in the world. These are situations that no human being deserves to endure. The regime has a zero-tolerance policy for any type of dissent or opposition. This is enforced through a system of collective punishment, where up to 3 generations of a person's family can be punished for the single infraction of a person. What this means is that if I were to commit a crime, a political crime, let's say, for example, I complained about the government or I complained about Kim Jong-un, not only would I find myself in a political prison camp, but my parents and my grandparents could also be in that camp together along with me. Many of you may be familiar with this gentleman here, Shin Donghyuk. How many of you guys have read his story, Escape from Camp 14? Excellent, very good. And if you haven't, I can't encourage you enough to read this book, because this is truly one of the deepest glances into how brutal this system of political prison camps is today. He was born in political prison camp number 14, Kaechon, one of the most brutal prison camps in North Korea. It's incredible because of the very fact that he was meant to live, work, and die in this camp. Literally. He was not meant to ever leave this camp. One of the most shocking things I learned about from Shin was the fact that they had never even bothered to teach him who the leader of the country was. In this camp, Shin experienced starvation, extreme punishment, and horrific torture. At the age of 14 years old, he witnessed the execution of his mother, who was hanged, and his father, who was shot. These were punishments for attempted defection. Years later, a new inmate would come into this political prison and would talk to Shin about life outside of the prison walls. He told him about all of the places he had traveled. This was an individual who had been a little bit more privileged, but he talked about all of the places he had traveled, the delicious foods he had eaten. This was something that Shin had never even considered, what life outside of those walls were like, and he could hardly imagine the things that this man was telling him. After he learned about this life outside of the prison, he decided that he could no longer live this way. So at the age of 22 years old, Shin Donghyuk managed to escape one of the most brutal prison camps in North Korea. And just like Shin Donghyuk, who eventually managed to escape out of North Korea, so have tens of thousands of other North Korean refugees, and they've managed to escape into neighboring China. It's estimated that 30,000 North Korean refugees are hiding in China today, and they fled across the border in search of food, money, family, and freedom. But if they are caught by the Chinese authorities, they will be forcibly sent back to North Korea, where they will be severely punished, sometimes even to the point of death, because of having illegally left the country. So because of their lack of status in China, North Korean refugees are extremely vulnerable and are at risk of exploitation. It's estimated that over 70% of North Korean women, female refugees in China, are trafficked or are sold to Chinese men. Some are even forced into brothels and into work in sex chat rooms. And I've met some of these women who are far younger than me and were sold for as little as $200. This is not the reality that they had hoped for when they made that dangerous journey across the border. Under Kim Jong-un's leadership, it has been a strategic priority to deal with this defection issue because they understand the risk that it poses to the regime's long-term control. With massively increased security on both sides of the border, increased punishments for attempted escape, and more crackdowns, under Kim Jong-un's leadership, the number of refugees making it safely to South Korea has almost decreased by 50%. Despite these increased security challenges, each year, thousands of North Koreans continue to make the dangerous journey attempting to escape out of North Korea and to find freedom. The regime understands the threat that information from the outside world poses on their system. They've traditionally put massive effort into isolating its people from the outside world so that they could determine the narrative that the North Korean people would believe through extreme indoctrination. So imagine with me for a minute. You turn on the TV, and there is one channel, the government channel, and all it talks about is how great your leader is. So you don't really want to watch TV anymore, so you turn on the radio, and it's the same thing, government broadcasts. Your cell phone cannot make calls internationally, cannot call outside of the country. And this is probably the most devastating one of all, especially for the millennial generation. There's no internet. This is the reality for North Koreans and for young North Koreans today. The government's obsessive attempts to micromanage society has stifled the people's potential, ultimately enforcing a poverty upon 24 million North Koreans. The state has relied on and makes every attempt to isolate, atomize, and disempower the North Korean people in order to control them. And as the North Korean people are learning about the outside world and are becoming empowered with information and money, they are realizing that they can no longer rely on the state, but are continuously relying on themselves and others for the things that they need. They also continue to face an extremely brutal system. And this is the reality of the issue that we face today. And this system is focused on ensuring its survival at whatever the cost. These are the extreme challenges that the North Korean people face. But this is only half of the story.